Shall we begin?
Hey YouTube, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And today I want to speak with you about five mistakes, just 5 errors that are commonly made when people are setting up canisters that then result in trouble. Trouble being things like leaks, poor operation, noise, things of this nature. So let's get right to it. Number 1 is improper setup of the hoses. This is not uncommon, especially with setups where you have to cut the hoses yourself. With something like a fluval, FX5 or 4 or even the 6, these hoses just simply clamp on, but even there, if you don't clamp them down correctly, you're going to have trouble. The other issue, of course, is in hoses that you cut, you can end up doing a cut like this one here, which is a bit jagged. And the reason you don't want a jagged cut is because when you push that all the way in, you're going to have a higher and lower area, and the lower area, the one where the indentation or jagged cut occurs, that could actually give you a leak. It could be a place where the pressure isn't right. So what you need instead is you need a nice clean cut. So get some kind of a device that will give you a very, very clean cut. I actually use garden shears, pretty big garden shears, and they just slice it very nicely and very cleanly. So with hoses, be sure you get a nice clean cut, and then when you're setting up your hoses, be sure that they're pushed, as you see here, pushed all the way as far as they can, all the way in as far as they can go before you lock them down. Don't over tighten these things because they are plastic, they will crack, and if these crack, you'll have a whole other set of problems involving leaks. But definitely give a nice clean cut, push the hose all the way as far as it'll go, and then go ahead and fasten it down to where you know it's pretty secure. Take it to where you can hand tighten it about right there, and do not over tighten any. You really shouldn't over tighten any kind of plastic fasteners. The other thing, of course, apart from the edges and how you're fastening it, is the length of the hose. And this is a common mistake people make. I certainly made the mistake early on. You leave too much extra hose. This hose is looping way off to the side and then going up to your tank, maybe looping around. It really doesn't matter so much on the intake, because that's working usually off of a siphon anyway, and it's going to siphon what it siphons about as fast as it can. But in the tubing that goes back to the tank, that is requiring your motor to push the water to the tank up the hose, you want that tube to be as short as it can be, and still allow you to move the canister around a little bit if you need to. I mean, you don't want it super so tight that your canister is sort of off the ground a little bit. What you want is, but you want the hose to be fairly tight with maybe just a little bit of extra, maybe about that much, but otherwise cut the hose. Don't make your motor overwork. There's a thing called head pressure, and what that means is the how much pressure, how much is gravity fighting against your motor. The longer that hose is back to your tank, the more head pressure, and really the more wear and tear you're going to put on your motor, the harder it's going to have to work, and you will impact your gallons per hour. They will go down based on the length of that return hose, okay, or the height that you're working with. Okay, that's you're battling gravity. Okay, so keep that in mind. Your return hose should be trimmed so that you have maybe just a little bit of play, but really not much more than that. Okay, so number five is hose setup. Okay, number 4, media placement, and this requires you to understand the flow within your canister. Every canister has different ways that the water flows through it. Some of them push the water through the media to the bottom and then push it back up. Some pushes the water from the tank right to the bottom and then sucks it up through the media. So you have different flows, different directions of flows. You need to understand that. In something like a Sun canister, like the one I have right here next to me, this big monster here, Sun 704B, happens to be a backup canister. It's a bonus tip: have a backup canister, just in case. But in that canister, the water is pushed all the way to the bottom. It siphons out of the tank and goes to the bottom of the canister, and then the motor sucks it up through the media and then returns it to the tank. Now, your media placement then in that kind of a setup should be sponges going from coarse, medium, and fine on the bottom. This gives you good water quality, good water clarity. It removes detritus and particles, so that those particles then don't get into your biological media and clog it up. Okay, you don't want your biological media entirely clogged up, and the way you do that is by having a coarse, medium, and fine sponge in the bottom basket in this case, so that the water is moving through the coarse, through the medium, through the fine, and then arrives at your biological media, which in my case, in this 704B, would be in the middle trays. And then in my case, what I also enjoy or prefer is then have the chemical, if it's charcoal or Chemipure or Purigen, that would be in the top basket, so that it is the last thing that water comes in contact with before it returns back to the tank. Also, in the event of medicating, where you need to remove charcoal, Purigen, Chemipure, whatever, it's good to have it in the top basket. It makes it very easy to get to, so you can take it out while you're medicating your tank if you should ever have a reason to do so. Okay, so media placement. Now, Pond Guru Richard over in Great Britain, across the pond, as they say, has a lot of great videos on canisters on how to set them up. He also recommends putting in ceramic rings at the bottom of the canister to break up and capture big pieces and to break up the water flow. And I'm doing that in the 302s that I have on the 60-gallon. So media placement is crucial. Watch the Pongaroo I think it's called Pimp My Canister, Pimp My Filter, something like that. He's got a whole series, and no doubt in that series there's a filter like the one you have questions about. So I think he does hang-on backs. He does everything, sumps, trickle, you name it. Okay, so check him out. Point number 3 is trapped air. Trapped air is a common issue. And it can create noise, and it can reduce the efficiency of your canister. Some filters, like the Fluval, that prime themselves and actually stop, I believe, every 12 hours and allow air to escape and prime themselves again, fill themselves up again. That is a filter that pretty much takes care of itself on that issue. But if you have, let's say, a hose that isn't fastened correctly, or maybe a crack in a return, in the top of the return or something, you will get some air into even a Fluval, along with some leaks. But in the case of a Sun, the 704B doesn't really require it so much as the smaller models. But even with the 704, I still will rock the canister. After I fire it up, I will, if I need to, I'll push the prime button to let the water fill up the canister. Of course, I always usually fill it up before I get it running. But I go ahead and fire it up, plug it in, and then I go ahead and rock it just a little bit. And by rock it, what I mean is, of course, you just do this, just back and forth, and you will hear and see the air escape and come out through the return hose. And sometimes I'll also do burping. You just give it a little tap, and that's all it needs. It releases the excess air. You can hear my beagles in the background. They love being part of my videos. So there he goes. There must be a squirrel or something. All right. The other point I want to make is point number 2 is an improperly seated or positioned impeller. And this is certainly with the fluval, you know, you put that in and you screw it down, and you know, you screw down the whole motor unit, and you'll know instantly if that thing isn't seated right. With canisters like the Sun, you need to be really sure that you have found the right notches and screwed this thing down correctly. And so when you're doing it, you take this thing, make sure that this little rubber nipple here, make sure that that is pushed into the hole at the bottom, and you'll feel it actually fit in. And I like to do it this way. I like to actually take this out of this top piece, and then push it in so you feel it actually going into that, to the little section that, there you go. See, that is now nice and snug in a bottom hole. Then this guy here, under good light, take a good look in here, take a good look and see where you are actually supposed to fit this thing. And you'll see the little notch in here where it goes, this little notch, it fits. And you'll see it, you'll see exactly where it goes. Do it under good light, and you push it down, and you should have a very distinctive feel that snaps into place. Because if that is not in place, in a Sun, you're going to hear a rattle, you're going to hear noise, and you're going to start posting in blogs and on Facebook, and complaining about how the Sun is a piece of junk, when the truth is that you never seated the impeller correctly, and because of that, it is making noise, it is rattling, and it'll drive you crazy. It'll hum, or it'll rattle, or it'll make a high-pitched noise. And very often, all you have to do is get in there and just make sure that that impeller is correctly positioned at the top and bottom with those little rubber pieces, and that the cap is correctly positioned and screwed down so it holds everything nice in place, okay? So, impeller position. Now, one thing I want to point out, this is interesting because in a prior video you probably heard that I dropped and broke the shaft of the impeller, and I had to order a replacement. And the replacement I received, and you can see here, the replacement that I received fits perfectly, but the blades on the impeller are longer. So it looks like Sun, it looks like they did a little bit of an upgrade, and from the time I bought this to the time that I needed that impeller replaced, and I'm assuming, now I'm not an engineer of any kind, but I'm assuming that those longer blades are gonna push that water a bit more effectively. So it was interesting to me to put them side by side and notice how the replacement impeller had longer blades, so obvious, and fits perfectly, as you can see in the photograph. Okay, so last mistake that is common in working with canister filters is incorrect, improperly done maintenance. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. People will pull everything out of the canister, and they will wash it under tap water, and this sort of thing. And of course, that kills your beneficial bacteria. In my case, what I do is I do rinse the sponges, and really rinse them really well, and then really squeeze them out with regular tap water. So the sponges, I'm not counting on the sponges for beneficial bacteria. However, while I'm doing that, my beneficial bacteria has gone through a very specific process. I have rinsed it in tank water, and by that all I mean is I've just simply taken the basket and dunked it in tank water a few times until some of the excess debris or detritus has come off of it, and then I put it into a second bucket of clean tank water. And so I'll do that with each basket that contains beneficial bacteria media, and then while it's sitting in that bucket of clean tank water, I will go and service the, clean out the canister, the baskets, the sponges, clean the impeller, all of that, clean all that out, and then come back and reassemble everything. So improper maintenance is number one in in five most common mistakes with canister filters. Now here's a little bonus for you. Dial in your maintenance, and what do I mean by that? I mean this: if you crack open that canister and it looks pretty pristine, then chances are that you might be doing your maintenance intervals. Your time between maintenance is too short. You could go longer. If you open it up and it's absolutely disgusting, you've gone too long. Okay, so keep a written record. Or in my case, I keep it in the notes in my phone. Okay, keep a written record of when you service your canisters, and when you open them up, pay particular attention to the condition they're in, and then you'll be able to then either lengthen or shorten the amount of time between canister maintenance. This last round of cleaning that I did on some canisters, they were in really good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit longer. Now keep in mind, if you add stock, if you add, let's say 3 or 4 fish, 5 fish, 6 fish, whatever, and you probably will have to shorten it. In other words, be thinking with the process. Okay, so if you add stock, and by the same token, if you reduce stock, let's say you sell off 5 or 6 fish, you could go longer. You could actually go longer. So just you have variables that you're weighing as you go along, but dial in your maintenance schedule, and in some cases, especially if you're using a pre-filter, and that could be either a separate unit that water from the tank goes through first before going into your main canister, or sponges that are over your intake. If you're using either one of those systems, you're going to be able to go for a very long period before you crack the big the big canister, the canister units. And for example, I have sponges over the intakes in the 60 gallon that go into the 302Bs. Those canisters are, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. They've been running 24/7, no noise, no leaks. They run perfect. And when I crack them open, they're actually really, really clean, except maybe for some minor buildup on the very bottom tray. So in that one, I am using the Pond Guru trick of rings at the bottom, and I am using a pre-filter sponge on the intake, and I think that is what's keeping those very, very clean. Okay, so those are my five tips for canister care and maintenance. 5 most common errors, and go ahead and post your tips below. What works for you? Your thoughts on the tips that I've just shared, and certainly be sure to sub and share and rate and all that good stuff. It's appreciated. And come on over and visit us at the Facebook page, Ben O. Cichlid. Okay, that's the Facebook page. And follow on Instagram, ben.o.cichlid. Okay? All right, thank you, my friend. You are appreciated. And those are my 5+1 bonus tips for today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.